All right, welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. It is the PGA edition. We are sitting here. It is midnight, so it's technically the 25th of January. Just finished up a awesome NFL season, and now we are heavy into NBA and golf and NHL if that's your thing as well. So we're going to talk the Farmers Insurance Open this week. We had a really good tournament last week talking about the Career Builder Challenge. That's a tough one to say. And I think, really proud of what we discussed. I think there was a lot of interesting plays, and a lot of those guys did pretty well. So hopefully we'll roll right into this week's Farmer Insurance Open and do the same. So as usual, I'll introduce my two co-hosts, Colin and Pete. Colin, what's going on, man?
We try not to get too results-oriented here, but I'm pretty happy about the picks that we have. And, Bryan, I seem to remember a question from you specifically wondering, does Hudson Swafford really have the upside to beat Ryan Palmer? Are you sure? I don't know. Is that a thing? So
yeah.
If I dunk on my co-host for like 5 seconds, I'm going to do that. We can edit in like a crying Jordan, like somewhere on his face over there.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll pay for that karmically down the road later in the season. But I was really happy with everything that we turned out. Hopefully you guys were listening, and you made all the right pivots and made a little bit more money.
None of us took Swafford, though, in that freaking draft, though, did we? Even though we liked him a lot, Colin, right?
That's the irony of it, yeah. Like, I don't feel bad about taking List either, but yeah, that is.
But, we had to pick a winner. That's the tough part,
Yeah, but I was positive he was going to win, like, pretty much all week.
It was a lock.
Yep.
Should have put the farm on it. Yep. Easy to say, but, definitely a fun week, and excited to get into more golf.
For sure. All right, so we are going to get right into the Farmers Insurance Open, which is a really interesting tournament. In particular, we have so much data on this. This is played at Tory Pines Golf Course. It's in San Diego, so which is a nice place because we don't really, or at least knock on wood, we shouldn't have to worry about weather. Usually good weather in San Diego. So, Colin, I'll kick to you. This is a place that they've had this tournament for a long time, and they've had the U.S. Open there. So we have so much data on the course, and it is a little interesting that there is two courses. They play at a north and south course. They split, and then they play at the north course for the final 2 days, I believe. So, how are you dealing with the two courses? What sort of guys set up well? And then I'm curious for both of you, does it matter to you, because they rotate, so some half the field plays on one course on Thursday, then they rotate. Does it matter which days the guys play on each course?
So we had a little bit of that last week with the Career Builder, where they play on 3 different courses, and I just kind of took it as an aggregation of all 3. I'm doing the same thing with Tory Pines this week. And the course fit signal is even stronger than I had before. And don't overthink this one. The courses are both really long. Take your bombers. It's a medium to strong course fit strength. Don't overthink it. The only other thing of note, and I do give also bad putters a little bit more of a boost this week, and I'm definitely inclined to do that because all the rain is going to come before the tournament starts, and that south course takes a long time to dry out. So the greens are going to be pretty soft. You're not going to get a lot of roll on your drives. I think it favors the bombers and the bad putters and everything that we do, and we have a couple podcast favorite names that are going to come up as a result, I'm sure. But Pete, do you agree with the overall assessment?
Yeah, it definitely is a bomber course, super long, long par 3s, certainly a lot of holes. I think it's like 7,689 yards or something. So one of the courses, and it's definitely a bomber course here. So luckily we have a lot of bombers that we like, and it's nice to have a course fit, and there's certainly a lot of course history too. So, it's a nice week of golf. And the other exciting thing is DraftKings has a lot of big tournaments, so it should be a lot of fun.
A lot of great tournaments, yeah. So this is sort of the biggest tournament so far of the year. So definitely a lot of good GPPs to get into for sure. Just some quick history on Tory Pines and specifically this tournament. Brant Snedeker won last year. It was his second victory. Jason Day won the year before, and then sort of going back, we do have some bombers. Bubba won it back in 2011. And of note, Tiger who is in this field again this week. He's back. He has won at this course 8 times. He's won 7 at this tournament, and then he won when the U.S. Open was hosted here. So quite a bit of course history. Phil Mickelson has won several times here, dating back to I think he won in 1940 or something like that. He's been playing forever. But Pete, are you excited for Tiger to be back just in general? I mean, I know that, we can discuss whether you want to roster him at all, but, are you excited to at least watch him or have him back in the sport?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for Tiger to come back. I mean, I hope he plays even reasonably well. Making the cut, I think, would be amazing for him. And hopefully we can see some, decent play out of him all year. I think that'd be great to see. It'd be huge for golf, and it'd be huge for DFS. So I think, everyone's rooting for Tiger at this point if you're a fan of golf, or at least most people are, and definitely makes it more fun. So I'm excited. I definitely think, he's a polarizing golf play for the reason that I think the public still wants to play him, but
right.
I assume Colin is off Tiger because I'm off Tiger for DFS.
Yeah, Tiger barely has enough sample size to register as anything, and you combine that with some really great course history. It's a data nightmare to try to figure out what he's going to do, and for that reason, just the massive amount of uncertainty around it, I'm steering clear 100%, just on the line of I don't know enough. Not necessarily that I think he's a bad play, but there's just not enough information for me to have a good opinion.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think that he is, not in good form and isn't a guy that you would be interested in, how do you discount 8 victories at a course? I know that, he won 4 or 5 in a row and just sort of got into his zone and just crushed Tory Pines. But 8, I mean, is there, I'm assuming that there's no other situation like this in golf where a guy just has dominated a course this much. So,
yeah, and I wonder, I think, because earlier you mentioned about, it's so great that we have a wealth of history of Tory Pines that goes back a million years. The only part I am sticking to my rule about just only use the last 5, and Tiger is kind of proving that, especially because how many of his victories were racked up while they were Tiger proofing the rest of the tour. This was the guy that was breaking the golf distance for a while. And I'm sure he racked up a lot of those victories when he had his distance. So it's an impressive streak, but I mean, that's the nice part about having a 5-year cutoff for your course history window is it just captures dramatic changes in golfers and kind of basically does a stopgap for that. And if there's anybody that has had a dramatic change in their form more than anyone else in this field, I think Tiger is number 1 with a bullet there.
I would think we could all agree with that. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because out of all the bombers, the guy who's done really well lately in the last 5 years is Snedeker, who's won twice in the last 5 years, and he is not a bomber. So, that's really interesting from a course history angle. All right, well, let's jump into our plays. We'll break it up into tiers as we usually do. We'll start with the bottom ones, and then we'll do a mid tier, and then we'll talk these top guys. This is a pretty star-studded field. It's headlined by, I guess we can call them the big 3 of this tournament, and Jason Day, Matsuyama, and DJ, of course. So we'll break it down. So let's start with the lower tier, which we're going to do 6,000, and then we will finish it with actually Tiger at 7.9. He's the only guy at 7.9, so he'll finish this off. Pete, do you want to go on this one, or did you go last time?
Sure, I'm happy to go with this one. So what was the pricing tier up until again? Sorry.
6 to Tiger.
6 to Tiger. 7.9. Okay, wow. All right, so at the cheap end, I think it's an interesting week. I do really love a lot of the value that's really, really in the mid 7s. So I think the first guy we should talk about is Hudson Swafford, who we liked last week. Unfortunately, he did come through with a win. I still think he's a really good play here. In general, I don't like to take players off the win because they're normally over-owned and normally the price goes up a lot. But I believe the pricing came out before the Sunday results. So he's really cheap, and I think he makes a ton of sense at 7,500. In addition to that, I mean, there's a lot of guys I think people will be interested in. I think that Tony Finau with his length makes a lot of sense. For tournaments, I like Jamie Lovemark, even though he played poorly last week just because of his length as well. That upper 7s range is definitely nice. And then the most obvious guy in this range, I think, overall is Charles Howell III at 7,300. I imagine he's going to be the most heavily owned player in this tier. I certainly love him for cash games, and with all my builds so far, he's been there. He seems like pretty close to a lock. Moving down, I'm struggling a little bit, and I hope Colin has a couple guys that he really likes in terms of who's popping like the 6K range. I've definitely stayed more in the 7K and built more balanced rosters, but if you want to fit DJ and some of these other guys in, I certainly think it makes sense to to look for guys down here. But I've been struggling. Like Stuart Sink and Grayson Murray are popping in my models, but I think with Grayson Murray in particular, we have him with a really high driving distance. I'm not sure exactly on the sample there. Another guy who I like, but I'm not sure I like him in this field as much, is Robert Garrigus, who had a really nice showing last week. But Colin, help me out here with the 6K range, because I feel really, really confident, have a lot of conviction, especially with Swafford and Charles Howell and Finau. But what's your opinion on some of these guys in the 6K range?
I agree. Howell and Swafford are definitely the top of this tier. They are going to be easily the most heavily owned of this range as well. Speaking of which, I guess now is as good a time as ever to plug the fact that in player models, we are now projecting ownership. And I have the ownership projections. I do agree. They're definitely going to be high up there. In terms of like sub 7K, the biggest one for me by far is Martin Laird. If you want to talk about results that are not priced in, he had a really good finish last week. Good course fit, decent course history. I also have him probably as the highest owned of the sub 7K range. Or I guess I should say second, because I think Adam Hadwin is going to be number one for sure, considering he was the winner last week. I think Hadwin is also just like a decent play from a value perspective. I like Garrigus a lot more. Like I think he's fine in terms of the ownership value nexus. I agree. Garrigus is probably my favorite sub 7K guy. Then the other one is definitely Lucas Glover, who fits the mold perfectly.
Bad putter.
Bad putter and decent course history. So I think he's got it all together there.
No Harris love? Harris English?
He kind of fell off I'm really not liking that last couple result. The guy I actually prefer him right above him is Scott Stallings, who I think has the best course history in the entire field, relative to his ability. Let's pull up his results here are just like they're not befitting of someone of his skill level. He overachieves here way hard. I would be remiss also if I didn't mention that bad putters get a boost here to say that Keegan Bradley is maybe one of my favorite GVP plays of the week.
Oh, come on. I'm off the Keegan Bradley train now.
What did he do? He wasn't that bad last week.
Yeah, watched a couple putts, didn't go in, just biased.
Soft greens. We got soft greens this week. It's all going to get fixed.
Yeah. No, I'm happy that he's not rolling again, because nothing makes me happier than fading Keegan Bradley. But yeah, I certainly think he's interesting. I think, what about Luke List and like some of these other guys in that range that are bombers? I like him a decent.
Oh yeah, I have List up there for sure. I think he's solid value for sure. I wonder, like, coming off of 28% ownership last week, and he'll be decently touted. Like, is it cash? I don't know if I put him in cash, and I think he's slightly too heavily owned for tournament. I think he could pivot to some other people, like your Keegan Bradleys, your Jonathan Vegases, and like just get a way bigger drop in ownership. So he's kind of in that no man's land for me, where like doesn't stand out either from ownership or value.
Yeah.
Pete, what are your thoughts on Hadwin? I mean, I assume that you kept up with his great round last week.
Yeah, the 59 was awesome. I was watching that. I was actually fading it because I had Swafford, and I needed him to win, was fading Hadwin, who is surprisingly pretty owned. So that round definitely, I had 150 lineups, didn't have him. So it wasn't good for me, but it was awesome to watch him shoot that. So I do think it's a spot where, he's a pretty good play. I like some of these other guys a little bit more. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hadwin he will be just way too high owned for me, and yeah, I can find a little bit better value slightly above him. So it's an ownership thing for sure. I think he's just going to be too heavily owned.
Have we talked about Scott Stallings here?
Yeah, he's my favorite course history play in the whole field. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's crushed each of the last 3 years. I mean, like a no-name guy, but it's sort of hard. He had the win and that's normally a guy you want to fade, but he's also had a runner-up the following year in the top 25 last year as well. So at that point, 3 years, is that, you consider that worthy of looking harder at him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's well within the window of course history. I think enough people are kind of getting onto him that maybe the secret's going to be out. But even just as, the only concern, I guess, there are some 4 straight miscuts from October to November. There's not much you can do about that, but it was a pretty good showing last week. So take that however you want.
Fair enough. Are you going to have any Tiger in tournaments, Pete?
No. I'm going to fade him, and I'm going to root for him really hard regardless. But, people are going to still pick him. I mean, that's the thing. Like, Tiger, when he was, just coming back and he was an injury-riddled mess, people were still taking him at a pretty high clip. So, we were talking a little pre-show about his ownership. It might be lower than what we have currently. I think we have him at 9 to 12, but he still will be clicked a good amount. And I just think there's better guys for the price. He's priced up, but nothing would make me happier than to see him do well. So it's kind of a nice little spot to fade him financially, but root for him and still have incentive with him down the road. Because obviously, if he does well, it's going to be great for DFS golf.
Yeah, so before we got off this tier, by the way, Pete, I did have a question for you. I forgot. How high would, I guess, because this is going to be the case with Howell for sure. How high would ownership, if you thought, would a projected ownership for player have to be in golf before he's an auto fade for you?
What and depending, call the format. I mean, if it's like a top heavy GPP, once they start getting 15-20%, I have no problem fading a golfer at all, regardless of who it is. But
that's what I think. Yeah, so over 20%. Yeah.
Any expensive tournament, or even like the high end ones, and that pay 20% of the field, or even a little bit more in some cases. I think there's so much equity in just taking the best golfers. And one interesting thing is a lot of these guys are really thinking about game theory as well. So some of these super chalk plays end up being a little lower owned than you would expect in certain tournaments. So
yeah, I'm sure the high stakes is drastically different. I'm just thinking like the lotto ticket.
Yeah, let's talk about like the $3. That's the 500K birdie that pays 100K up top. I mean, he might be a reasonable fade in that. I mean, if he comes in 20-25%, the issue with taking stances like that in really low buy-in tournaments is that the public just isn't as sharp. So yeah, the DFS community that drives ownership in a lot of spots, they might be all over Charles Howell, and I expect them to be, but the rest of the public might not be thinking about him. So it's tough. That definitely applies, especially in the majors. A lot of these guys, especially if it's a lower name guy, you can definitely find a reason, even if you expect them to have high ownership amongst like the DFS community, there's still reason to play them. So it's kind of a tricky and dynamic question, but I certainly think, this week I think is a nice blend, and I wouldn't hate the fade of him if I knew he was like 25-30% in that $3.
Yeah, that was my feeling as well. I guess my general feeling in golf is it's not like basketball where there's like a value lock that you have to play just because like it doesn't matter what ownership is or represents such value. I think golf is high enough variance that like anybody over 20% just I think should be an auto fade. Even if it's not like a 20% payout to first, even if something like a 5% payout to first. And a little flatter payout structure. I just think you're putting yourself in a much better position to win if you fade anybody with over 20% projected on.
Yeah, and a lot of it also depends on, where can you pivot from a likely high ownership guy? Like, is there actually like a guy around him that has upside? So on that note, Pete, Swafford or Howell in tournaments?
Probably Howell. I mean, I'm not sure.
With the high ownership, okay.
I think they're both can be heavily owned. I know we have Swafford 9 to 12 right now, but I think I assume that those two are going to be within like 5%. Is my guess. I could be wrong on that. I could be way off, and maybe I'm overestimating just the win last week. But I do expect a lot of people to be on Swafford this week. So we'll see. Like the general public, I expect to be a little bit more on Swafford, even though I don't think they're paying that much attention. But they at least saw that he won last week, at least some of them that are paying attention to golf mildly. Yeah.
One note that I have here that I meant to mention earlier, but I'll throw it in now. Patrick Reed is playing, but he's not in the DraftKings field just because of when they release the salaries. They can't release his they can't put him in the field and release a price after they've already released their salary. So you will see him on the golf course and think, why is he not in the models? But that's intentional. No one could roster him. So just a quick note on that. Let's move to the next tier, which is going to be all the guys right above Tiger. So we'll start with your boy Brendan Steele, Colin, and then let's cap it at Jimmy Walker at 9.4. So let's save Mr. Snedeker, who's won twice here. So he's 9.5, and then the last year will be 9.5 up to Jason Day 11.4. So Jimmy to Steele.
I mean, unsurprisingly, I do have Brendan Steele as the best value in this range. I think his ownership is going to be pretty. I don't know. I have him like in the the low to mid, like somewhere like 10 to 12. And I think that's about right, maybe a little bit higher because he had a good showing last week. But like I slightly ranked above him, I have Gary Woodland, who they rate pretty similar to me. Steele's a little bit cheaper. Gary Woodland definitely is decent for this. And below that is probably my favorite kind of like ownership value nexus and Daniel Berger. I think he's going to get really overlooked because John Rahm is so close to there, and John Rahm is just a lock for 20% ownership every single week. I think those are the only guys that can really put up the required numbers to do that. If you look at people like Francesco Molinari and Emiliano Grillo, they're accuracy guys. They have lousy course history here to back that up. I think slightly below that, I don't know how much you really want to weight Snedeker's course history, considering it was played in a hurricane last year. That's always something I struggle a little bit with, contextualizing course history and course results. I feel way better about Mark Leishman right above him, who I think will return as a decent return and far lower ownership. So everyone else below that, I don't see them returning. They're not projected high enough. And sadly, that does include J.B. Holmes, who once a fan favorite, now just fallen to the wayside.
Oh, no J.B. Holmes love, huh?
No, and nobody wants to push it harder than me, but it's just bold don't lie here.
That's interesting. I was expecting you to potentially be on him. I think Rahm is the guy here that is going to be super chalky, like you mentioned. I think people are really on him just in general. The guy that I really, really like, and I think he's going to have a good year just overall, and I definitely going to be targeting him on long courses, is Gary Woodland. I think that he makes a ton of sense in this spot. We have him projected to be really heavily owned as well, and I just think he's a guy that you want exposure to in formats like this. Outside of that, I think that there'll be some interesting ownership on Daniel Berger. We have him at 9 to 12 right now. That's another guy that I definitely want to buy stock in overall, but I'm not sure how I specifically feel about him in this spot. What do you think about Berger, Colin?
I mean, I think he's I have him him and Rahm basically neck and neck in terms of what they're going to do. And I think that, Berger's an easy pivot from Rahm, especially in a GPP, considering his ownership is going to be half of what Rahm is, I think.
Right. No, it makes sense. But yeah, I think Woodland's clearly the play here. And Brendan Steele certainly is a good play as well, obviously.
So you're into some JB Holmes?
I was just waiting to hear if the JB Holmes whisperer is going to be on him. So, that's all I was looking for. Bomber, you want to do it.
Yeah, if Colin doesn't love JB, that's a scary sign.
Yeah, the fear with him is that he's just spraying it all around. Which is definitely possible. So he can get himself into a lot of trouble. And obviously, when he's on, his distance is incredible. He's a great birdie maker, and Colin talked about him a ton. So yeah, that's let's definitely think about him for GPPs and hope he gets back on the train so Colin can endorse him. But I think he's a pretty good fade this week.
Yeah, for cash games especially. So Colin, this is our running dialogue / debate, whatever, where you are less enthused by the word upside in golf.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's directly applicable to how we use this ownership, because in a sport like NFL, for example, I look a lot at a wide receiver's projected ceiling. So when I'm looking at guys who rate similarly in models, and we have projected ownership for NFL, I weigh what is their actual ceiling, what is their range of outcomes versus what their ownership is going to be. So you could have a guy who's going to be, they have similar ratings, but that one guy has a significantly higher ceiling. So you have to include that into where their ownerships are. So if you don't really believe in sort of upside, does that mean that you should just sort of take whoever's going to be the lower owned guy if you have them similar players? Like if you have them rated the exact same, should you just take the guy who's projected to be lower ownership every time?
Yes.
All right.
No further, just yes. Like I'm going to keep it simple. Just yes. I agree with that philosophy 100%.
All right. So let's get that. Let's get applicable here. So a guy who sort of rate highly, and we might have similar models here since we sort of agree, with course history and driving distance and all that stuff. So Howell and Swafford are going to be really high, approaching 20%. And a guy that I have, and we might have it, is Luke Liss, who is in the exact same sort of salary range, but is going to be maybe 5-6%. So is he a superior GPP play to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Okay. Pete, you have any disagreements here?
No, I agree. And I think it's going to get fun with this stuff. I mean, just trying to figure out ownership. And I definitely think it's one of the best sports for it, especially in these really, really big tournaments. Then, we'll get to some interesting leveling too on like some of the higher stakes stuff too. So, yeah, I definitely think ownership is huge in golf. So I'm going to take the guy who's less owned almost always, especially in these bigger tournaments.
Yeah, I think golf is arguably the sport where you have the potential to cruise on ownership and game theory alone, just like minimize ownership because all the projections are so close to one another over the long term just because there's so much variance that if you just went by low ownership alone, I think you could be profitable as long as like you have some salary floor of like maybe like leave no less than like 1K like on the table. Like just if you just like ownership is like your max weight and just fill out all your max owner. Like, yeah, I think at least at the state of golf now, you could probably get there. Higher stakes, who knows? That's when everybody's thinking rational actors.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just think of like just the uncertainty in golf versus basketball, like Dustin Johnson's the highest priced guy. He's at 10% odds to win this tournament. So, what are his odds to be a top 3 player versus Russell Westbrook's odds to be a top 3 point guard? Like, it's a massive difference in uncertainty between the two sports. So leveraging ownership and leveraging uncertainty, which is something we talk about on our content, seems like golf is just a really good sport to do it. So,
oh yeah, I think if golf ever reaches like Nash equilibrium or whatever for ownership, no player should ever be higher owned than 20%. That's my rough ballpark where it should be if golf is solid.
And we're talking about Swafford and Howell like approaching that, so that should be really
tough. I think they're pretty easy auto fades for me this week
for sure. All right, Pete, kick off this high tier. So it'll be Snedeker, 2-time winner Snedeker, not a distance guy, but has played well here. Up through Jason Day, who is really intriguing with these top guys that are really all expensive, 11K plus with Day, Matsuyama, and DJ.
Yeah, I like 3 guys in this tier a lot: Snedeker, Koepka, and Dustin Johnson. I also think Matsuyama makes a lot of sense as well, but he's just 100 more than Dustin Johnson, so I'm going to lean DJ there. But yeah, for me, I think Snedeker, the course history is something to definitely pay attention to, even though the course fit isn't great. The other thing that's not ideal is that he is a good putter, so that's one downside, but he's a 2-time winner, so I'm definitely going to pay attention to that. Koepka, we're talking about a lot of young guns and guys that were expected to have good years this year, or even be better than they were last year. Koepka's on a short list for me for sure, and anytime it's a Bombers course, I love getting exposure to Koepka, so I love him. And then DJ, I mean, Bombers galore. There's no one who's a better bomber than DJ, so that's what I'm liking. I'm sure Colin probably still has Jason Day.
I do. Yep, that's exactly right. It is. I do have DJ above Jason Day for what it's worth because he did have an actual result to bring him down a little bit compared to DJ's second place finish of the Euro that week. I guess the other concern, like, do you care that he's coming from a Euro tournament and playing in California, or is he rich enough to fly in a Gulfstream? Pressurized air cabins means the jet lag is not a thing.
No, I've heard people talk about the jet lag as an issue. Pete, do you have any thoughts there?
No, it certainly is. I mean, I'm a huge believer in just like travel and rest and home stuff, more so than I think the average person, or not even the average, but I think that in general, I buy into that more with every sport. And specific to golf, the jet lag definitely could be applicable here, but I don't know. Maybe it's a reason to get on Day over DJ because of that, or Matsuyama, but I just really, really like Dustin Johnson this week. Just all this.
I have him as the top rated overall for sure. It's just, again, a question of ownership and what's he going to be at compared to Jason Day. I have him pretty similar. That may be an overthinking thing where, I don't know, maybe they're about even. It's kind of a wash. I think Matsuyama, I still, like, in his long-term adjusted round, I'm sure there are still some injury-plagued results in there that's kind of keeping him down. So I think, like, he's rating out as the worst value of the top tier, and I understand why he's doing it. But I was bearish on him before and basically said, like, all right, I think I'm wrong on that than I was. So I have reason to believe he might be a little bit higher. I have no idea what his ownership is going to. I mean, like, it'll be up there for sure.
Lower than the other guys for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. But it's a question of, is it enough to, like, straight up pivot? My favorite GPP this week, kind of in the nexus of all of it, is probably Justin Rose. There's not a lot of great history here, but he has the distance to compete for sure. I have him rating very similar with Matsuyama, and he's just like a full 1,000 cheaper. I think you can really, like, if you start with Rose as your first anchor, I think he has a good, like, ownership to value nexus type going on. I think Koepka is going to be fine, but I think he's also going to be very heavily touted. I think and God, if I'm holding true to that line of go with a lesser owned guy, I would believe that Ricky Fowler would be way less owned than Koepka. That could be wrong because the public loves Ricky, but it's
we've talked about it before. Like, Ricky just has a floor, ownership floor that, like, he never goes below.
Yeah, that's like that's
okay. Yeah, and he would still be 12% owned.
Yeah, and we do have, like, those player-specific ownership floors kind of priced into our ownership projections pretty well. I'd be interested to see, like, I don't know, if he ever got below, like, 6%, like, yeah, I'd probably have to take him. But Ricky and Brooks are rating really similarly for me right now. Interestingly enough,
you like Ricky as much as Brooks, huh?
Yeah, and the reason is because, like, I actually don't have Koepka as that great of a course fit right now, which is surprising because you think, like, oh, it's bomber for sure. But, like, I don't know, maybe it's because he's just too good at putting and that's actually weighing him down. Like, it could just be, like, a weird, like, kind of artifact of that. He still is a bomber for sure. I mean, it's not DJ level or anything, but yeah, I have them very similar, like, in pretty much every respect.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, what do you think about
I was interested by it too. Like, yeah, I guess Fowler has a little bit, like, better driving accuracy and scrambling. Like,
you're definitely more accurate than Koepka, for sure.
Yeah.
Colin, what are your thoughts on Snedeker? I mean, like, he, from the data wise, like, if you didn't look at all of course history, like, you would never roster him because he doesn't fit.
Yeah, and I just, like, it's almost like a prequel to Jordan Spieth coming up the Masters. It's like, yes, his course history is undeniable. That it's in stark contrast to his course fit. Like, I don't know. I can't get there with Snedeker. It depends on how much you believe, like, essentially, like, inexplicable course voodoo magic or whatever happens to this place. Because you look at his history and he just dominates this thing, save for, like, a single rogue miscut. But it is just so at odds with everything else that he's doing. If you could do a tiebreaker, like, I don't know, his results have been okay after the major swing. There's a lot of kind of, like, I mean, there's some top 20 finishes there, but kind of a lot of middling stuff, and did miss the cut in Hawaii. I don't know. I can't get there with Snedeker net. I would fade him probably even in cash and definitely in tournaments.
I mean, really interesting this week with all these top tier guys. And
It's probably a really good fade thinking about it more because I think the ownership will be driven up by the course history.
I do too. That's always my concern. I mean, just it seems like the prior year winner is just always higher than he should be, and yet in the fact that he doesn't fit the course and he's won twice, seems like a dangerous, trap play almost.
Yeah.
One thing I want to get out there just real quick pertaining to all this stuff is in general, I think that there's become like a way too much of an emphasis on game theory overall, not pertaining to DFS golf, but just within DFS. I do think that it's still really, really applicable. Obviously, game theory is going to evolve, and it's going to be a huge part of it as people get more efficient with predicting ownership. But it's gone so far. Like that's all everyone's talking about in every sport. But golf really is the one sport that I think baseball is another one that's pretty. There's a large edge, really understanding ownership. But I think golf even more so is really applicable. So before we get hated on for just going straight game theory out of the blue, I do think it's really applicable here for golf.
Yeah, I think the ratio of like predictability of outcomes to ownership is just like it skews so heavy. Like ownership should be far more of a driving decision than like projections or even player models or whatever. And it'll be that way, I think, for the next like 1 or 2 years, is because golf is really hard to project. So like you're never going to get like a super like I know this guy is absolutely going to go off and like no one else does. You're just never going to get that in golf.
Okay. I agree. I mean, with these new ownership projections, we'll definitely make them, part of the show from now on. We won't try to go overboard with it, but we'll balance it with our plays. But definitely something to consider. Now it's part of our model, so go check those out. All right, well, let's pick our winners. So we'll do it like normal, any play, and then the second guy has to be under 9K. I think I'm
going second. I haven't gone second in forever. I'm second.
I'll go wherever. Brian, where do you want to go? I think I went first last time, maybe. I'm not sure, though.
All right, so Brian goes first.
I'll go first. I'll take DJ.
All right. I'll take Jason Day. I can't not.
Okay. Give me Matsuyama and give me Woodland.
All right. Oh, Woodland was such a good one, too.
Yeah, Woodland was definitely my guy.
I'll go with GPP, right? I'll go Berger.
Yeah, that's right. I think Berger and Woodland are like really close. Yeah. I like Woodland more, but
yeah, me too.
So if I'm just sort of looking at odds here, JB Holmes is the correct guy. It's either him or Howell, but Howell's I feel like that's the chalky one. I'll go Howell. Let's just go all in on that.
Missed the chance, like the opportunity to twist.
The odds actually
so deep.
Take Tiger, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh, Tiger would have been Tiger.
Straight odds suggest it should be Tiger, but
Tiger was the correct play for so many reasons there.
God, I should have taken Tiger. I know.
No, you definitely shouldn't have. I don't think.
If Tiger wins, we all win. I mean, honestly.
Yes.
Everyone wins. The world wins.
Oh yeah. I hope we get like countless more shirtless Christmas pictures after his next tournament victory. Just keep all of it.
Can you imagine if Tiger was like there on a Sunday at like a major this year?
Oh God.
It would be absolutely like at Augusta wearing the red, competing against like say Dustin Johnson and Spieth or something. Like people would go. It would be
insane,
outrageous.
Oh, there'd just be like I want to do an over under on like the tonnage of like beer can litter, like how many pounds of aluminum and glass are just like sprayed across, like all decor goes out the window.
Oh yeah.
We need this. This needs to, out of all the stuff that we've had to deal with in early 2017.
The world needs you, Tiger.
Yep. You're the hero we deserve, not the hero we need.
Exactly. All right. Well, on that note, I think that's probably a good spot to end this pod. Thank you guys for listening. We're really excited about the Farmers Insurance Open. Like we said, there's a lot of good GPPs on DraftKings. So get into that as we get in more information on FanDuel and get more content on that. For their golf product, we'll talk more on that for sure. So good luck this week, and we'll talk to you guys next week.